Hi.
Hello. So
Hello.
you're back for take two since I forgot to hit record on take. So with awesome active coach Jacqueline Rose. Thank
Hello.
you on the show.
You're welcome. Happy to be here.
And thank you for your patience. So
Oh,
we're here just again for you to tell us who you are, what you're about, what got you into coaching, who you help and how you help them, and anything else you want to say today.
my name is Jacqueline Rose, and I am a transformational life coach. I started coaching in April will be 2 years. And what really started me on the journey of coaching was my own self-discovery journal, our journey. And I want to say about 4 years ago, I was like 203 pounds. And I really felt like that was what was really making me unhappy is the way that I looked. And I had a friend of mine suggest that I go to therapy. And so I started going to therapy and I did something called EMDR. And I started a meditation practice. And as I started that meditation practice, I started to realize a lot of uh, beliefs that were in my subconscious. And I just started really getting an interest for the mind and how the mind worked. And with this, I started this meditation that I would do every single morning and every night, and it was from Aaron Doughty. And I realized after about 3 days of doing that meditation that people would come up to me and say the same things that the meditation said. And so I was learning about the subconscious and how you reprogram the subconscious and how it's most effective when you're in, your theta state and your subconscious is recording all the time.
Yeah.
And so I really just started changing my own behaviors and noticing how I took on a lot of, I want to say negative, but protective programs that my mother had. And I noticed that my mind never showed it to me, that I constantly would look at how I wasn't like my mother, and I wasn't looking at how I was like my mother. And once I started to notice all the ways I was like my mother, I realized that those same programs I was giving to my son, and that I needed to stop the generational patterns with me. It gave me a lot of responsibility. And so as I, you know, did my own journey and had my own journey of self realization, I wanted to be able to help other people in that too, because it changed my whole life. It, flipped my life upside down. I perceived life differently. My resentments, like I remember one day looking at starting to like collect all of the information from my mother and her upbringing and almost like play it in my mind as a story, like, oh, okay, because my mother had she lost her grandmother, her father, and her twin brother within 3 months when she was, I believe, about 18 years old. And then that's when my mother started drinking. She was an alcoholic. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, would I have done anything different than my mother if I was in that position? And then realizing that she had this belief that was very evident that she didn't feel like she was good enough, and unintentionally put that belief into me. And then I realized my son is autistic. And then I realized how some of the things that I would say to my son could come off as you're not good enough. And I just knew that I had to stop that and I had to show up differently. I don't know how. This tells you how powerful your mind is. I don't know how I didn't notice this, but it took me until I'm 40 now and I was 37 when I realized this. So my mom, when I was 17 years old, she jumped off a balcony. She tried to kill herself and she broke her back, severed her spine. And I met my husband when I was 19. So that's only 2 years later. And my husband had jumped off a balcony and broke his legs and ended up throwing his body into shock. And he became type 1 diabetic, which is super rare to get that later in life. And when I started noticing patterns in myself, I was like, oh my God,
Yeah.
how did I attract this other person that I would be that caregiver to? And I just didn't even notice it. When my husband told me that when I first met him, that this had happened, I just was like, oh, well, my mom jumped off a balcony too. No big deal. Like, it just was like, oh, it's not a big deal. And then years later, when I noticed patterns and behaviors and, wanted to become a coach, I was like, oh my God, this is a pattern that I repeated, trying to be that caregiver. And
They say
um,
they're one of our parents, right? That's what they tell us.
yep. And I know they're so different because my husband is definitely not an alcoholic, but my husband is very can be very critical. Um, he's in management and he's in sales and he is a problem solver. And so the feeling was the same, is that I could never do anything right for him. And I was crazy to me because I realized that I was constantly trying to prove myself to my husband that I was married to for years. And I'm like, why? Because I was trying to prove myself to everybody. I was trying to prove my worthiness to everybody. And I was just not aware of that. And so when I got awareness through therapy, through meditation, um, I wanted to be able to give that awareness to other people. And if you don't have the awareness of it, there's not a whole lot of responsibility. And when you have responsibility, you're able to change things. And so
Right.
that's kind of what started my whole journey into coaching. I didn't know what a coach was, but I knew that I had a lot of knowledge that could help a lot of people. I am a nail technician by trade. I'm a licensed beautician and have been doing it for 17 years. And so I realized that it's natural for me to just go and talk to people and they open up and they tell me their story and I make them laugh and I make them feel good. So I can do that naturally. I've been practicing that. But now I have this information so I can teach them, I can connect with them. And I have a lot of, my own trauma of my own growing up, handling an alcoholic mother. Um, there was a lot of in my own, I say my own awakening to my own, ego voice in my mind. A lot of, I say, mystical, magical things happened, especially in meditation for me. So I am a coach, I am a teacher, but I also am an intuitive psychic. So when I started to meditate, I started to get like flashes. I think I might have had this happening my whole life, but I was so in my head that I never noticed it. And so when I started doing these meditations, I would get these flashes of pictures and numbers. And one night the first time that it was like, I remember speaking to the universe and being like, if this is like legit that I'm getting these signs, I need to have validation. And so I was laying down in my bed and I was starting to do a meditation and I was starting to fade into like sleep. And I got this flash of my neighbor and her husband, and then it was like a Mexican sandal. I don't know why there was a Mexican sandal there. They are from Mexico. And then there was a flash that said Philippines. And so I got out of my meditation and I text my neighbor and I said, "Does the Philippines mean anything to you? Like, why would they're from Mexico, right?" And she said, "Yeah, my nephew's going to the Philippines for Christmas." And I was just like how random is that? So
Yeah.
I take some of my intuitive ability. I'm not great at controlling it. A lot of it just comes when it's coming, just like downloads and stuff. But I take some of that and then the knowledge of the mind and the knowledge of my own, story and journey, and teach people that and relate to people with my own stories. Um, and that's really what really got me into coaching, is I just wanted to be able to help. And if it's through social media, because I have a YouTube and all of the things,
Mhm.
um, that's where it started, was just kind of putting out stuff on social media and kind of I sent out a signal, because the more you share, the more people reach out to you. And
Right.
so little by little, they had their own stories, and so they shared them with me. And, I looked in, I don't even know how I found Coach Sean Smith. I have no clue, but I loved how direct he was. I
Yeah.
loved how he really taught about how our mind works.
Yeah.
And I just realized that there were most people that were around me were looking for what I could give them or what I could offer, and I was gonna do it anyways. So why not like start a career in a business doing it? And step by step, brick by brick, I have slowly started this career. Right now, I am just at the very beginning stages of learning how to do something called QHHT hypnosis therapy. And it's kind of like past life regressions, but also being able to get into the subconscious. And so that's another thing that I would add to like my package or individual to help people with kind of figuring out why they may be stuck in certain areas of their life.
Very powerful stuff. Thank you for sharing all that.
Oh,
So
thank you.
I gotta ask, you mentioned, you changed your behaviors and you changed your mindset and you made all these shifts, over time. How comfortable was that for you?
Oh, not very comfortable at all. I mean, it isn't comfortable in in some ways when you have the realizations that you are the one that needs to change because you can only control you. In some ways it's like ugh, it's ugly to look at. There's still to this day there's still some, when I start to talk about my son, which my son is autistic, I still have guilt around some of the behaviors when I was unaware.
Sure.
Um, and I'm still working on trying to give myself forgiveness and grace for I didn't know what I didn't know. But it's taking a look at that shadow side, and that's real hard. I see why people don't see it. And I see why still have a lot of blind spots. I really live by, and other people are different, and it's kind of hard to convince people of this, especially if I'm coaching them. But I really live by when I'm triggered, I am projecting something, and whatever I'm projecting, there's some part of it in me.
Right.
And I have to clear that up in me, give grace to that in me, and then show up differently. So one day I was in my room and I was bitching in my head about how my husband leaves stuff all over the house, right? I'm just getting all mad and picking up things. And I look out the window and I see that I had pulled weeds out of our garden and I had thrown it in the yard. I mean, just in that moment, and I was like, "Oh, look at me pulling out the weeds, throwing it in the yard, and leaving it for my husband to pick up and clean up." As I'm complaining, believing this story that, my husband leaves stuff. I just, in that moment, could see how I do the same behavior. And so it's not easy to look at. And some of it is, real hard. If you go out into like just like the political ring and you get like, really triggered by some of the political things that are going on, which I can tend to do, I can also tend to go like, there are times where I have taken control away from people. And there are times where I have been judgmental about people by the way that they look. And so I need to correct that and have grace in that and see it in myself, which is not, people do not, I mean, even when I say that to some of my friends, like, well, they do that, but I do. And they're like, I don't, that's a little stretch. And I'm like, yeah, it may not be a lot, but there's a little bit of it in me that I really don't like, and I need to notice that little part that comes up and I have to change it. So, no, it is not comfortable, but it's a
Right.
necessity.
Yeah.
It's definitely a necessity
Yeah.
to see it in yourself so you can correct it in yourself. And then just have like grace for yourself and just have grace for other people that, it's not easy to do this work. It's actually really hard. I say it's a warrior. You have to be a warrior to really like look at yourself deeply and be able to notice things that don't work for you, but not judge yourself on it. Be able to kind of correct those behaviors and see where they come from, and stay kind of neutral to things. And it's definitely not for the faint at heart, but it to me it's the only thing we're doing here.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, I'll actually talk to my behaviors like, what are you doing right now? Why are you showing up this way? Why are we
Yeah.
mad about this or that or the other? Instead of being grateful, what are we doing? You know,
Yes.
instead of getting so irritated. And my clients just, they want the answer right away. And I go, well, I'm sorry, but the uncomfortable answer is you're not going to get it right away
Mm-mm.
because change requires discomfort. You don't
Mhm.
go to the gym and do one push up and get 90 days of results.
Mm-mm. I wish.
So, right? And that's the other thing, people want the instant gratification. I go, the problem with instant gratification is it's also gone in an instant.
Mm-hmm.
What you want is long lasting change, and that requires commitment and sacrifice and
Mm-hmm.
strength and dealing with the discomfort and taking that camera and instead of looking at everyone else and what they're doing wrong, going like this and looking at yourself, going, what inner work?
100%.
Because what I'm projecting in here and in here is going to manifest out there, and I'm going to,
Mm-hmm. Oh, I mean,
so, you know,
it for me, like, I'm like, if everybody really believed it, it's a belief, I get it. But for me, I really truly believe that whatever you put out, you get back.
yeah,
And that's good. You can collect, like, you can put out great karma, or you can put out quote unquote negative karma. And so it's
yeah,
almost with that belief. I mean, I'm not perfect at all, and I can see the points of where I am not. And but it's this integrity thing. Like, even if nobody's around, am I doing the right thing? Am I talking about somebody? Am I, like, what am I doing? Because it doesn't matter if people are around to see it. It's what I'm putting out into the world, and I will get that back in some form. And it may not look exactly the way that I put it out. And so, but I can find it 100% of the time. What I'm putting out, I can find it, because I work on self awareness, and I work on self and inquiry. So I'm constantly, holding myself to a high integrity. I mean, I'm not perfect, but when I do catch the times that I am not doing things in integrity, just switching it the next time. Next time I'll do the next, like, this is something that happened recently with my son, and I was just like, so we went to the store, and he bought a big bag of M&Ms. I told him he could buy something, and he buys this big bag of M&Ms, and we go to ring it up at the self checkout, and it rings up for a penny. I
mm,
don't know why it rings up for a penny. I didn't put the SKUs in, right? And my
right.
son goes, "It's a penny. It's not supposed to be a penny." And I'm like, "I don't know." I put it in the bag, and I just kept, scanning. He was like, "You're not supposed to do that, Mom. You're a thief. You're not supposed to do that." I'm like, "Hey, be quiet." Like, I'm trying to, like, don't say that out loud. People are going to think I'm still, and I'm getting aggravated with them. And I'm like trying to check out real quick. And the lady comes by, and she's like, "Is everything okay?" And I'm like, "Yes, it's fine. Thank you." And I grab my stuff, and I walk outside, and I get mad at her. I'm like, you know, "You're calling me a thief. I'm not a thief. I didn't put it in the machine like that. I'm paying for it." And then I got back to the house, and I was like, "Wait, if I would have said right then to the lady, 'Hey, this rang up wrong. I don't think it's supposed to be a penny,' because that really wasn't the right thing to do."
Mhm.
And I was teaching my son a lesson in that moment, that it was okay if something was wrong, it wasn't your fault. You could take advantage of it, right? So I had to be able to look at that and go like, "Oh, that way, if I would have said right then, 'Hey, this rang up wrong,' my son would have never called me a thief. We wouldn't even had that whole ordeal." And we did. And then I walked out of the store, and I got mad at him. And that's the lesson I taught him. So I had to come back to that and tell him, "That was wrong of Mom. I shouldn't have done that. The right thing to do was to go back and tell them that this is rung up wrong. And I'm sorry that I got mad at you. If I would have done the right thing, then this." So I needed to correct that, but I had to look at that. And a lot of people were just like, whatever. And so it's me really keeping that integrity, and, noticing my own faults, but giving myself grace on it, and being able to show up differently, and
Right.
realize what I'm teaching my son in those moments. Um, and that's what I with my coaching, our whole program is, we set up goals. Like, I ask them a list of questions. We set up goals for 36 months. And then each week for the first 7 weeks, I have videos that I send them that teaches them about their ego, about their subconscious. So they get the foundation of the mind, basically.
Mhm.
And then I really teach an experience, of, like, different different stories, different things that have happened to me, is what I'm really good at, is teaching about, because that's what I did. I sat down and we talked when I did nails, talked about stories and how I could relate. And so I kind of do that in my coaching. And as I teach them about, the law of attraction, how it works. Some of my clients don't believe in it, and that's fine.
Right.
Um, I'm of the belief that it's always happening, if you believe it or not.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
it doesn't matter if you believe in it. It's, whatever you're putting out, you're getting back, and whatever you bring attention to, you'll have more of it. And I don't want to say I've done the work, because the work is never done, but I've learned some of my programming about money,
Mhm.
and how I, for some reason, didn't realize that, like, first of all, abundance is everything. It's abundance of love. But I remember when I was so desperate for so much money all the time, I looked around my house and realized, like, 80% of the stuff in my house, it was given to me for a gift. Or, my dad is a custom carpenter, and so he's made me all this beautiful furniture. Like, there's just so many things that have been gifted to me, but I was so in the lack mentality that I was not noticing that the life, the
Wow.
house, the neighborhood that I'm in is something that I dreamed about as a little girl. So I realized that I was able to manifest that just by holding that in my mind, but I didn't realize I was doing that. And
Right.
so I teach that to people. I teach how we can change our thoughts and shift our perspective. And as we shift our perspective, it helps bring more into our life, if that's love or money or whatever you're wanting. It can help, but I give them tools, different tools that can help. But again, it is their journey, and they have to have their own awareness and their own realizations.
Yeah, absolutely. That's an amazing story. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
You know,
Thank you. Thank you.
and you talk about money and the relationship you had to it and everything, right? And it's all my clients up to this point, except for one or two, right? It's just a horrible relationship with money, right? Because they think that they don't deserve it. And so they have this thing of, well, that's not for me. I can't have that, blah, blah, blah. I go, says who? And
Yeah.
it usually goes back to parental teaching or lack of, self-worth or whatnot. So
Mhm.
I have one client who I took on when I first started coaching, no income at all, you know,
Mhm.
and well, I've been, 15 years and off and on of 5150s, psychiatric holds,
Mhm.
had no income, but I want you to coach me. I'll give you $20 a week to coach me. I'll
Mhm.
$800 social security check. Okay, great. What do you want to do with that? Well, first, I want my mental health back. Okay, great. How many 5150s have you had? 30. Whoa. Right. So
Mhm.
I've been working with this individual now for a little over a year,
Mhm.
5150 since I've been working with her. So that's amazing because she's been,
Mhm.
right. She thought she was having one day. So she went and got checked out. And the doctor or whomever was there said, "You just have a migraine." And she was blown away. And that was an awareness in her that her life had changed from that point.
Mhm.
She's like, okay, well, how do I make money? What do I do, Joe? I go, what do you love to do? What are your hobbies? "Well, I like crafting. Got any craft work to show me?" No, no one's going to buy my craft work. Let me see what you got.
Mhm.
This beautiful, amazing stuff that she made from the Dollar Tree.
Mhm.
We'll pay money for that.
Mhm.
What's your answer? It's been in front of you the whole time. You just couldn't see it.
Exactly.
So 2, 3 days ago, she did like a 20-minute craft show on Facebook.
Oh,
She's been
that's
selling
awesome.
her crafts now for like 3 months. I think flea markets online. She's now teaching a class at her rec center, all because she was able to change her relationship here about money.
Mhm.
So now
Exactly.
the money's free flowing. And if I go back to, I don't know, 6 or 7 months ago, she was, I don't want to pay you $20 anymore. You're worth way more than that. I go, I know, but with you, it wasn't about the money.
Mhm.
With none of my clients, it's not really about the money. It's about helping. It's about getting
Mhm.
a outcome. But you were in a place where you were about to kill yourself. You could have paid me
Exactly.
$5 or $0, and I still would have helped you.
Mhm.
And so, when we recognize that pain and we put out that into the universe, that comes back to us tenfold. So, this last month for me, I got that back in leaps and bounds. I mean, it was nice. It was a nice payday. Let's put it
Good.
that way, So my most profitable month in 2 years of coaching, uh,
Mm-hmm.
because I changed my relationship to the money.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when we get back to all this and we're talking about transformational coaching, is it comfortable? No, it's uncomfortable. And it has to be. Otherwise,
Mm-hmm.
it's not going to work.
Exactly.
And if our most toxic relationship is one with ourselves, then that's what we have to fix before we can go and help anyone else fix themselves.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
I was my best toxic friend.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Let me go hurt myself and put myself through hell so I know how to help somebody else because I've been through it now.
I know. For me, yeah, I thought about all the like trauma and the things that I had gone through, in relationships and my mom and all the stuff.
Yeah.
And then I was like, wait, this could help a lot of people. Like it was just that like I've been through a lot of different things. And at one point I was like, why me? And then I was like, oh, I understand why me. Like I get it now. I had to go through all of that to be able to relate with, I've had, marriage problems, I've had family problems, I've had money problems, I've had parent, like you name it, I've had different problems and I've worked myself through those problems so that I have some answers that could help people. But really, it is all about the story we tell ourselves about all of these things. And you have to notice the stories. That's a big thing Brene Brown talked about, and I use it in my coaching all the time. So, what's the story? What's the story that you're telling yourself right now? Well, it's going to be hard for me to get a job because I am old and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, well, that's just a story. It could be your reality, but it is a story that we're telling ourselves. So I just want you to notice the story first, okay? Because it doesn't have to be reality. You can change that story. Um, and so that's me too. Like even in my own stuff with my husband or my son or anybody that triggers me, I just know that I'm telling myself a story. And I have to identify what that story is and then almost reframe it. Like with my husband, I thought my husband was really critical, like my mother. And then I reframed it where my husband is a Virgo, and Virgos are very analytical, and my husband's in sales and management, and that's his nature to fix and problem solve. So it doesn't necessarily mean he's being critical and I'm not good enough. It's just the way he is. And now I can address those problems. I can talk to him about how I feel. Before, I would just be mad and I didn't even know why.
Yeah.
I was just mad and it was his fault. But then I realized, well, first of all, I have a belief that I'm not good enough. So if he's critical of me, then I'm going to constantly hear the story. Oh, he doesn't believe I'm good enough. So it's a story and it's a belief. And so I need to be aware of that. And then I can come to him. And I did. I came to him and I said, I have these problems that I don't feel like I'm good enough. I don't think I'm pretty enough. I don't think I'm a good enough wife. You name it. I don't think I'm good enough. And so sometimes when you say these things, I know it's not intentional, but that's if you could be aware of it. If you could be aware of it for me and help me meet me in the middle of these. And then also like I notice certain things with him. Like you may not be aware. He's not on. I always say we're on two separate journeys together.
Mhm.
So he has his own journey. And I remember wanting him to be more like me and know about the mind and do meditation and do those things. And then I realized that again, I was trying to change something outside of myself and I had to accept him for who he was and on his journey. And I realized certain things like with him, like just I noticed that I'm sure you've heard of the five love languages. And luckily when we first got married, 15 years ago, our pastor at the time made us read the book. It was part of our like whole thing. And so I noticed that like whenever I complimented him, because he was words of affirmation, that was his second love language. Both of ours are physical touch for our first love language, but his second one was words of affirmation. And I was like, okay, he really feels loved when I compliment things that he does. And so I need to be aware of that and I need to compliment him. And even almost maneuvering conversations. I teach this to a lot of people. It's because people don't have the words to get across what they need without triggering people. So I call it the sandwich technique, where you say something nice, say something that you mean, and then you say something nice again. And
Yeah.
so I'll help some of my clients with like, okay, you want this done. So let's say this and then say what you really mean and then put something nice and see if you can deliver it that way. And if you deliver it that way, you might have a different outcome. And because I used all these techniques myself, and I remember with my son when he was younger, I needed help from my husband and I didn't feel like I was getting it. I was just bombarded with diagnosis and everything that was going on with him. And every time I talked to my husband, he would get defensive, he'd get triggered. And I remember sitting in my kitchen realizing that like he always gets triggered and I don't know what I'm doing to trigger him. I just need help. And so I just went to Facebook and I wrote him a long letter saying those things that I notice that I trigger you whenever we talk, and I don't mean to do that. But what I'm really feeling right now is overload, and I need help with this, this, and that. And then I got a different response because I was able to write it down and send it to him. And then he was able to like process it. So and that was before any of my journey. I just would like have these like, okay, this and this is always happening. How do I do it differently? Okay, I'm gonna write it down. Maybe I'll do it that way. I mean, I didn't care. All I wanted was more support. That's all I was asking for. And I didn't care how to get it. But if we were always triggering each other, then if you do the same thing, you get the same result, right? So I had to change that. And that's
Yeah.
you can apply that with everything in your life, if it's fitness, if it's behavior, if it's how you do anything. If you're doing the same thing and it's not working, then you sometimes need somebody to help you go, that didn't work. That's not working. How
Yeah.
do we do something different? And how do we, and it's with a coach and having a coach is it's great because it's an outward perspective. I'm not attached to anything that anybody does. I've helped people with their marriages when they wanted to ask for a divorce, and then I ended up helping them actually stay in the marriage, which I didn't care. Like I was like, if you need support during divorce, I will. This is what I'll do. You need somebody to hold your hand, I'll hold your hand. But then I would just teach her about like why your husband did these things and why this is our subconscious and what did he go through. And then it gave her a different understanding and how do you ask for what you want. And so I don't care what people do with their life. It is their journey. But I can show you a different way and it might give you a different outcome because I'm not attached to it. I'm out here, I'm an outer perspective. And for me in my therapy, that was huge to have somebody go, wait a minute, didn't you say your husband does this every single time when he gets triggered? And I'm like, oh yeah, he does. Like I did, like you're like, he was like, so
Yeah.
this is really not out of the normal. Oh no, it isn't. And then you're like, all you needed was one person to go like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So, I mean, again, like you said, I, it's not about the money. Yes, if I'm rolling in the dough, let's bring it on. I'm ready to manifest all of it, but I'm going to do it one way or another. I'm going to coach no matter what. Like it's just going to happen. That's just what I do.
Yeah.
um I'm just super curious about people. I'm super curious about their stories. I love that type of stuff. So my mind just it sees patterns, it sees beliefs, I see it in me so I can see it out there. And so how could I help as many people? Because again, what else is there to do? I feel like not to down, anything else going on in people's lives, but I feel like this is what I'm here to do is to help people like eliminate some of the suffering that they have. And that's what I'm doing on earth is to help my family and anybody else that I can. And as we all kind of do this, it helps kind of heal our world because I think it's greatly needed right now. We're at that tipping point right now on earth. And so if we can help more people and especially the littler generations, um, the better, our kids have and their kids have if our world keeps going. you know.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you so much for your time today.
Well,
Yeah,
thank you so much.
this awesome active coach, Jacqueline Rose. So
Thank
before we
you.
get off the call, if somebody wants to contact you, how do they do so? Do you have a website or how would they contact you?
Yes, my website is JacquelineRoseCoaching.com. And how I spell my name is different. It's a long story, but it's different than anybody else spells it. It's JACQULINE, Rose Coaching. That's my website. So if you ever wanted to sign up for a package, on Instagram is where I am most of the time, is Jacqueline Rose Coaching. I do a private page on Facebook, but I always invite people in. And then I have a TikTok too, Jacqueline Rose. So I'm on all the platforms. And then there's the YouTube. It's the spiritual life of Jacqueline Rose. And that's more like, that is instructional videos, but it's also kind of like a diary. It's just the things that I'm learning, and it's just kind of impromptu. I have vlogs, I have things about manifestation and behavior, and you name it, it's there. So that's where you can contact me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. And guys, we need a great coach. Here she is.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great day.
Thank you.